Berlin, mid-August 1933. SA formations march camera perfect through the Brandenburg Gate, just like they had done the previous January, in the night when Adolf Hitler seized power. This footage was taken during the shooting of the film Hans Westmar. What is so special about these pictures is that the cameraman was using 35mm colour film, at the time still an expensive rarity in Germany.
September the 30th, 1934. The Reich Agriculture Festival in Goslar. Farm workers, men and women from all over the Third Reich are seen waiting in front of the Imperial Palace. In an essay to mark the festival, a young German girl wrote,
"Above all, the Harvest Festival is our way of thanking God for his rich blessings, but it's also our way of giving thanks to the government of the Reich, which, through the measures it has taken, has restored the farming community to full bloom."
Delegations from the SA and the SS were also awaiting the arrival of Adolf Hitler. A few weeks earlier, the dictator had deposed of his biggest adversary, Ernst Röhm. Now, following the death of President of the Reich, Paul von Hindenburg, Hitler was leader and imperial chancellor of the German nation. Director Kurt Waschneck, a pioneer of filming in color, had chosen this day to shoot one of the first cultural films using the new two-color film material as it was known. The result still left something to be desired. In Goslar, a guard of honor from the army of the Reich was present to welcome its new commander-in-chief.
On the Buckerburg near Hamburg, a stand had been built for a ceremonial rally. The film's director didn't have to worry about a setting for Adolf Hitler's appearance. Hundreds of thousands of farm workers had turned up to pay homage to the dictator. Kurt Waschneck had deployed 2 camera teams equipped with color film. After the film was presented to the press in December 1934, one critic saw the report as an experiment that could not stand up to comparison with nature. But another critic praised the outstanding color footage, especially the shots of the traditional costumes. Swiss journalist Konrad Warner described the propaganda spectacle on the Buckerburg in a factual report written in 1944.
As they awaited the arrival of Hitler and his retinue, people were filled with excitement and anticipation. Then, as a convoy of cars approached on the plain below, thousands upon thousands of voices shouted out, "Heil!" The sound hurtling down the slope like a hurricane towards the man who knew how to hold the German nation in thrall. Hitler could only make slow progress through the crowd. He was flanked on both sides by countrywomen in their pretty traditional costumes, who were pushing forward to see him, clutch his hand, and look into his blue eyes. The enthusiasm of thousands of people constantly shouting Heil stirred each individual into a frenzy, which increased the impact of this man's personality even more.
The unmistakable shortcomings of the color film process made it unlikely that Waschneck's report would ever be shown in German cinemas. In summer 1937, the first 16mm colour film produced by Agfa appeared on the market in Germany. Despite its high price, many amateur film enthusiasts were prepared to dig deep into their pockets to use it. Members of the Institute for Folklore in Halle also filmed with the new material. In 1938, racial researchers in Friedeburg and der Saale documented a community festival for their archive. The Germans had settled in comfortably under the swastika. The overwhelming majority of the population were devoted to the Führer.
Film enthusiasts throughout the Third Reich began using color film. When he wasn't at work in his bakehouse, Hamburg master pastry chef Kurt Lehfeldt was out and about shooting footage of his hometown. Lehfeldt preferred the products manufactured in America. In 1935, the Kodak company developed color film, which it also marketed in Germany. From May to September 1938, Lehfeldt documented life and work in Hamburg's famous warehouse district and in its port. Lehfeldt's camera also captured the Kaispeicher A warehouse building. Visible from afar, its tower was a landmark. The success enjoyed by Hamburg's port stemmed originally from international trade, but Germany's gateway to the world had been hard hit by the Great Depression. A large proportion of Hamburg's merchant fleet had to be decommissioned. In its dockyards, workers were laid off on a huge scale. But round trips to German seaside resorts or through the port were, it seems, highly popular with locals and tourists. From the landing stages and the old Elbe tunnel, ships headed down the River Elbe.
Also captured on the film taken by Lehfeldt are pictures of the Wilhelm Gustloff, a luxurious cruise liner which was intended to symbolize the classless nature of Nazi society. Strength Through Joy was not an organization for Nazi bigwigs, but the party expected anyone who was allowed to sail to Norway for a week to behave appropriately. Through work procurement measures financed with credit and through contracts awarded by the Senate, the Nazis had succeeded in reducing unemployment. Thanks mainly to increasing rearmament contracts from the German Navy, the situation was also gradually improving in the port. By 1936, Hamburg's 6 major dockyards were again providing nearly 20,000 jobs. Lehfeldt's film recordings are rare documents of a bygone age, when 1,300 mobile electric cranes and hundreds of stevedores unloaded goods from all over the world.
The Hamburg pastry chef entered his 20-minute-long documentation in a competition and won first prize. His footage portrayed many ships which today exist only in the memories of Hamburg's elderly citizens. Like the Monte Rosa, a liner which, in 1931, sailed on a regular schedule to the east coast of South America. The vessel normally carried cargo and passengers, but the Monte Rosa was also used for pleasure cruises.
One of the first film enthusiasts who could afford the new 16mm color material was Hitler's chief pilot, Hans Bauer. In Berlin on September the 27th, 1937, Bauer filmed the state visit of Italy's fascist leader, Benito Mussolini. In front of the Technical University, the Führer gave the Duce and his entourage a demonstration of Prussian traditions and showed his guests the results of German rearmament. Hans Bauer was allowed to film the spectacle from one of the rear rows on the VIP stand. After the demise of the Third Reich, these unique documents of Hitler's immediate environment were regarded as lost. It wasn't until 1988 that they were rediscovered in the estate of a former US soldier from Tennessee. As head of a translation unit of the American Secret Service in Munich, in 1945, Herbert St. Goar learned where Agfa colour film footage taken by Hitler's pilot had been secretly buried. He secured it and took it back with him to Chattanooga.
Displaying weaponry of all kinds, the parade lasted 3 hours. Mussolini was particularly impressed by the goose-stepping, so much so, in fact, that on his return, he also had the snappy marching style introduced into the Italian armed forces. Hitler saw the pompous parade as the expression of his enhanced sense of self-esteem. We are somebody once again. We have demolished the Treaty of Versailles. We have the same arms as our adversaries. Perhaps ours are even better.
That autumn in 1937, it wasn't only at home that the Third Reich demonstrated its regained strength. At the World Exhibition in Paris, the Germans were allocated a site right next to the Eiffel Tower for their huge pavilion. The Soviet Union had built its exhibition hall directly opposite. In terms of monumentality, the communist dictatorship was certainly on a par with Germany. Hitler had commissioned his new favorite, Albert Speer, with the design of the German pavilion. The two had spent many nights in Berlin and on the Obersalzberg, poring over drafts and drawings. On Sunday, February the 27th, 1938, a cine enthusiast from Nuremberg filmed this carnival procession. A local Nazi newspaper wrote,
"It's not always necessary to wonder whether you're in the midst of supporters or enemies. Instead, you should set yourself above inhibitions that are better suited to the affected and not to the Germans of our magnificent era, an age which, whether in earnest or in jest, offers incredible impressions and proves time and again that the concord and solidarity of a great ethnic community are the most wonderful gifts of the National Socialist state."
In 1944, Swiss businessman René Jouvet published a factual report on his experiences in the Third Reich. In it, he describes a conversation he had in autumn 1937.
"My friend was over the moon. He had expected many things, but not what he was now witnessing with his own eyes. Such happy, optimistic people. You've not seen everything, I told him. Above all, you're forgetting what price the German nation has had to pay. The loss of personal freedom and truth in public life."
By this point in time, Hitler had long since decided to lead Germany into a new war, and also to tighten measures against the Jewish population. Consequently, on one of the carnival floats, caricatures of Jews hung from gallows, as if this was something totally natural. According to eyewitnesses, the float was greeted with frenetic applause.
In Quedlinburg in 1938, a member of the SS took this color footage of his most senior boss. Heinrich Himmler was visiting the town. He came to Quedlinburg every year to honor his great idol. King Henry I lies buried in a cathedral, and Himmler turned the church into a national shrine. The head of the SS wanted to replace Christianity with Teutonic cult worship. His devotion was to the swastika. His lifetime goal was to eradicate the Jewish nation.
In early May 1938, Hitler's chief pilot, Hans Bauer, accompanied the Führer on a state visit to Italy. He documented his impressions of the trip in a short film, which he entitled Beautiful Italy. 6 months later, the censor approved it for public showing in the Third Reich. The state visit was to have been documented in color by a professional camera team from the Nazi propaganda machine. But problems with the optical filters made its footage unusable. As a result, Hans Bauer was able to earn money with his amateur film. After the annexation of Austria in March, Hitler had expected Italian leader Benito Mussolini to give his approval for Germany to seize the Sudetenland. The Germans actually wanted to sign a written agreement with the Italians, but their hosts were hesitant and only relented when, in a public statement, Hitler declared the Brenner border to be the eternally valid border between Germany and Italy.
The official host was King Vittorio Emanuele III, and the monarch knew how to ease Mussolini into the background. Hitler was repulsed by the obsequiousness of court ceremony, and he let the king feel it. On May 5, 1938, Hitler and his entourage were taken on an excursion to Naples, where they were given an enthusiastic reception. With his small camera, Hans Bauer filmed the sights of this city at the foot of Mount Vesuvius, which had donned itself in truly festive garb for its state visitors from the north. After a few days, Hitler felt fairly irritated by the little king, who knew how to take center stage. Mussolini had no alternative but to put on a brave face. To snub the royal family time and again, the Führer had his old friend come forward and walk alongside him. On May 8, 1938, Hitler's hosts organized a maneuver by the Italian Air Force north of Rome. It was a case of staged saber rattling. In the Rome-Berlin axis, the Duce had long since been relegated to the role of junior partner. Mussolini actually feared that Hitler might start a military conflict with Czechoslovakia. Later, Hans Bauer remembered that the German guests were impressed by the strength of the Italian forces. But Mussolini had secretly decided not to become involved in a war in Europe.
Hitler spent virtually all of August 1938 on the Obersalzberg. On the terrace of the Berghof, he studied plans for the Wehrmacht's invasion of Czechoslovakia. One frequent guest was Albert Speer. The little time the Führer allowed himself was often spent with his architect. Hitler once had visions of becoming an architect himself, and in Speer he had found the ideal executor for his colossal plans. A sharp individual, Speer had been part of the dictator's inner circle for some time. The architect had also become friends with Eva Braun, who took these pictures in 1938. Hitler's mistress was a keen amateur photographer. Consequently, she too had developed a passion for color film. These pictures of the dictator should actually have been destroyed after her death, but in October 1945, they fell into the hands of the American Secret Service. As a result, what are probably the only uncensored pictures of Hitler's private life have been preserved in the National Archives in Washington.
In his memoirs, Albert Speer would later claim that the Berghof Society merely engaged in small talk and killed time waiting for the master of the house to arrive. But this, it seems, was just an attempt to cover himself and play down his own involvement in the crimes committed by the Nazi regime. In fact, many political decisions were taken on the idyllic Obersalzberg. Murders were even planned there. At this time, peace in Europe was hanging by a thread. Hitler wanted war, but the major powers of Britain and France were not yet prepared to engage in hostilities. So, with Mussolini's help and far-reaching concessions, in Munich they forced the dictator to the negotiating table.
Eva Braun edited her footage to produce film shows in color, which were presented in the evenings on the Berghof. When Hitler was not staying on the Obersalzberg, his mistress liked to make trips to Bavaria's lakes. Accompanied by her parents, friends and relatives, the athletic 26-year-old was the center of attention. Eva's sister Gretel also liked to film and take photographs. Sophie Stork, a good friend, who was also an artist, drew the film links. The Germans had no idea that Hitler had a mistress. As a senior correspondent with Reuters news agency in Munich, Ernest Pope had particularly good contacts in the Bavarian capital, so in his book Munich Playground, he engaged in speculation.
The buxom Evi Braun is Adolf's secret mistress. She was assistant to his photographer Heinrich Hoffmann. She cooks fine meals for him and serves him in every way you would expect from a German wife. There are rumors that the Führer has secretly married Evi, but I doubt that. German propaganda stresses that no mortal woman has the quality to become Frau Hitler.
Even though the films made by Eva Braun, chief pilot Hans Bauer, and the folklorist from Halle don't always document the decisive stations of the Third Reich, they do provide eloquent testimony to the nature of the National Socialist dictatorship. And it is only through colour that the flower-clad swastikas at this children's festival in Thuringia have such an oppressive impact.
May 1st, 1939. Berlin was festively decorated for Labor Day. Only 6 years had passed since the Nazis declared May 1st a national holiday. A move designed to bind the German working class to it through National Socialist slogans and pretentious prophecies for the future, and one that had already proved successful. Berlin journalist Ruth Andreas Friedrich described such events in her diary.
District leaders, factory representatives, block leaders, shop stewards, leaders from the Federation of German Girls and the Hitler Youth Organization, in fact all the state-appointed ideological controllers of the German people, ensure that only acolytes turn up to cheer on official occasions. Anyone who is politically unreliable, anyone who has roused even the slightest suspicion of being a naysayer, is to be kept away from such occasions. The yes-men know what is expected. They cheer spontaneously, at the right place and at the right time.
March of the Golden Standards is the title of a color film which an unknown cine enthusiast took on this particular day. He was part of a delegation from the Siebel Aircraft Works, a Nazi model plant which the day before had been honored by Hitler himself and was allowed to provide one of the 200 flag bearers. In his speech, the Führer adopted a pacific tone and castigated an alleged international clique of Jewish warmongers. But in actual fact, 4 weeks previously, he had ordered his military leaders to prepare the invasion of neighboring Poland. The rearmament of Nazi Germany was taking place at full speed. Consequently, on this May the 1st, it was mainly arms factories who participated in this parade of the golden standards. To the sound of appropriate marching music, the golden standard of the Siebel Aircraft Works in Halle was rolled up. This was the last May holiday to be celebrated in such grandiose style in the Third Reich.
Because the outbreak of the Second World War was only a few weeks away. In Berlin in the summer of 1939, there appeared to be little enthusiasm for a renewed call to arms. Memories of the Great War of 1914 to 1918 were too traumatic. This is how an American reporter described the mood.
Everyone is against war. How can a country start a decisive war with a people so tired of war?
An internal note stated that
faith in the Führer will now be put to the test more than ever before.
And a German journalist noted that
the observer cannot help thinking that people are deliberately indulging in unrestrained enjoyment.
It was a dance on the volcano. The recently completed Reich Chancellery was deserted. Albert Speer had adapted the huge building entirely to the Führer's wishes. But Hitler preferred to forge his plans for conquering Poland on the Obersalzberg, far away from the capital of the Reich. Only occasionally did he show himself to his people.
On July 16, 1939, the whole of Munich was dedicated to National Socialist creative activity. Hitler wanted the Day of German Art to be celebrated as a true festival of peace. The members of an amateur film club had been positioned at various points in the city to document all important events. The first item on the program for the morning was the laying of a wreath at the grave of architect Ludwig Trost. Local branches of the Association of German Amateur Filmmakers were commissioned more and more often by party officers to document major events on 16mm color film because there was still no satisfactory process for professional cinema productions. On this particular day, the members of the Munich branch of the association had been provided with passes and armbands which allowed them access to all prime filming locations.
On the afternoon of July the 16th, anybody who was anybody in the Third Reich took their seat in the VIP stand to marvel at a 3-hour procession of live images from 2,000 years of German culture. Not only was Germany's future to be National Socialist, so was its past. In the programme for this tacky festival, it said,
"The German eagle towers above the whole procession. With it ends this manifestation of our history. At the same time, it gazes into the eternal future, keenly and calmly, with pride and assured of victory, announcing the greatness of our era and our willingness to act. It is the herald of our doing and our plans."
American reporter Ernest Pope commented,
"The Nazi procession is the admission of the Führer's restless plans for conquest."
On the Obersalzberg, Eva Braun filmed Hitler in the pose of a resolute power politician. Hitler clearly displayed his willingness for war, while at the same time keeping open the possibility of a peaceful solution by receiving diplomats from all over the world.
Like Khalid al-Hud, the special envoy of the King of Saudi Arabia, the Wahhabis had established an absolute monarchy on the Arabian Peninsula. They had control of oil, a commodity so keenly sought after by every major power. And they were fanatical anti-Semites. In the end, all that was agreed on this occasion was an insignificant arms deal. Accompanied by his accomplices, Reinhard Heydrich and Karl Wolff, Heinrich Himmler had also traveled to the Obersalzberg. They were planning an extermination program to which not only Poland's intelligentsia, but also its Jewish population would fall victim.
On August the 12th, 1939, Eva Braun filmed on the terrace of the Berghof. Hitler was awaiting a visit from the Italian foreign minister. On official occasions, the Führer's mistress had to withdraw into her rooms. So this time too, she could only secretly film a few scenes prior to the arrival of the state guest. Count Ciano wanted to win over his ally for a new international conference, but the Führer was determined to defeat Poland militarily. Ciano's efforts were fruitless. This is how he described his meeting with Hitler.
He has decided to attack, and he will attack.
A march of the Federation of German Girls and the Hitler Youth in Offenburg on May the 19th, 1939. Here too, by now, the Second World War was not far off. Paul Stober, who had been documenting everyday life in his hometown ever since 1928, filmed the Nazi Party's local annual conference in the Baden district, in colour. Among the town's dignitaries was publisher Franz Burda. As early as 1933, in his popular radio magazine Syrag, he had already stated that
in its thoughts, desires and acts, the Syrag has always been solidly German and patriotic, nationalist and socialist. The spirit of the new age is alive in it. No Jewish capital has been invested in the printing house, nor are any of the company's contributors or employees Jewish.
The highlight of the event was the address by district leader Karl Rombach. Since 1936, Offenburg had been a garrison town. Accordingly, local military leaders also presented themselves in parade uniforms as part of National Socialist Society.
On September the 8th, 1939, a loudspeaker vehicle announced news of the Wehrmacht successes in Poland. The Offenburger Tagesblatt also printed special reports from the Army's Supreme Command. The Germans couldn't believe that their fathers, husbands and sons were sweeping through Poland so quickly. Every day, maps were hastily put up to show the latest conquests. On this particular day, September the 8th, German tank units had reached the suburbs of Warsaw. Hitler's first blitzkrieg ended on October the 6th with the capitulation of Poland.
Johannes Bliesener owned a photography shop in Korbach in Hesse. Time and again during the Second World War, he filmed events in his hometown. Later he edited them to produce Korbach in the War, a film which shows rare footage of life in a small town during the Third Reich. On March the 22nd, 1940, the National Socialist Public Welfare Organization in Korbach invited people to come for pea and bacon soup on Adolf Hitler Square. With food rationing in place, such occasions ensured that the poorer levels of society also got to enjoy a cheap, hot meal. Paramount, however, was the Nazi leadership's intention to promote communal solidarity along the lines of socialism in practice.
Since September 3rd, 1939, a state of war had existed between the Third Reich and Great Britain and France. But the Allies had not come to Poland's aid. For them, it was a case of wait and see. Hitler had been planning for months to launch a campaign in the West. But it had been postponed time and again. Finally, Germany's Supreme Commander decided that the offensive would begin on May the 10th, 1940. Infantry units were also stationed in Bitterfeld near Halle. In early May, they were moved west. They were to invade the neutral countries of Belgium, Luxembourg and the Netherlands, while German tank units headed through the Ardennes towards France.
At the start of his campaign in the West, Hitler moved to his headquarters in Rodert in the Eifel. From here, his chief pilot, Hans Bauer, flew the Führer to the front, time and again. On Oldendorf airfield, near Euskirchen, we see the dictator discussing the situation with Hermann Göring. In less than 6 weeks, Hitler had achieved what German armies had failed to achieve in 4 years in the Great War. France was forced to capitulate. After a long discussion with Hitler on June 6, 1940, Joseph Goebbels wrote in his diary that
"The Führer towers high above us all. He's one of history's geniuses. What a glorious era. And it will be followed by the great rest we all desire so much. The Führer perhaps more than any of us. Then we shall build the new Europe. After the war, we shall soon deal with the Jews."
Near the town of Cambrai in northern France, Hans Bauer filmed the wreckage of a French Air Force unit. This is how French historian Marc Bloch described the disaster in his book Strange Defeat.
"We have just suffered a devastating defeat. Who is responsible? The parliamentary regime, the troops, the British? The fifth column," our generals reply. In other words, everybody but them. No matter how one might assess the deeper reasons for this catastrophe, the immediate cause was the incapability of our military leaders, their inability to think the war.
On June 2nd, 1940, the leadership of the German Luftwaffe was waiting at Neergnies airfield for the arrival of the Führer. Filmed by Hans Bauer, the Air Force generals were in jovial and victorious mood, although their contribution to the military success had been modest. German troops wounded in battle were quickly flown in to form the backdrop to a special ceremony. Adolf Hitler arrives in his Mercedes limousine. While the commander-in-chief is greeting his troops, 150 kilometers away in Dunkirk, the last of 330,000 British and French soldiers are being evacuated across the English Channel. Exactly 4 years later, they will return to free France from the German yoke. Wherever Hitler appears with his entourage, he is given a frenetic reception. The dictator is at the zenith of his power. As chief of the German Armed Forces High Command, Wilhelm Keitel put it,
"My Führer, you are the greatest commander of all time."
Comments like that earned Keitel the reputation of being the Führer's lackey. In his memoirs, Chief Pilot Hans Bauer commented on Hitler's visits to the troops in France.
Hitler's intended effect was achieved. The troops and the French population were impressed by the fact that he appeared as soon as hostilities had ceased. The commander-in-chief ate from field kitchens. The only special requirement was for any canned meat to be removed, since the Führer always avoided meat.
Naturally, people back home in Germany didn't get to see such scenes. Even the camera teams of the weekly newsreel rarely had the chance to observe Hitler like this. With the exception of Eva Braun's private films, the films taken by Hans Bauer are the only footage which shows the dictator from close up, unedited and uncensored. On June the 13th, the French government declared Paris to be an open city. A day later, the German army marched into the capital. One soldier, Arnold Binder, wrote in his diary,
"Paris has been declared an open city. We have occupied it without a fight. The heart of France is in our hands."
On June the 23rd, 1940, Adolf Hitler visited the defeated French capital. Chief pilot Hans Bauer had flown the dictator to Le Bourget at 5 a.m. and was allowed to accompany him on a tour of the city. Once again, he used 16mm color film to document the bizarre sightseeing trip. Alongside Hitler on the observation platform on the Trocadero were sculptor Arno Breker and architects Hermann Giesler and Albert Speer. Later in his memoirs, Speer described the dictator's reaction.
"Wasn't Paris beautiful? But Berlin must become even more beautiful. In the past, I often wondered whether Paris shouldn't be destroyed. But when we're finished in Berlin, Paris will be a mere shadow. So why should we destroy it?"
Hitler had purportedly come to Paris as an educational tourist who was very keen on culture. But in reality, the visit was his personal triumph as a commander. In Les Invalides, he spent a long time next to the tomb of Napoleon, past and present dreams of world dominance. Finally, a visit to the Panthéon, France's Hall of Fame. The dictator's lifelong dream had been fulfilled, at least for the time being. 5 years later, the French would celebrate victory by dancing in the streets, and Berlin would lie in ruins.